Good afternoon and welcome to the Sam Lacrosse Show. Happy Monday. Well, of all the hot button topics in American politics today, one that has historically not been one of them is the United States Census. Instituted in 1790 after the ratification of the United States Constitution in 1787, the census was simply a unit of basic mathematics. The United States, as some of our most prudent scholars will remind you, is not a democracy. Instead, it's a democratic republic. So, what does this mean? Well, for one thing, we are not run by mob rule, and thank God for that. The French tried this, by the way, around the same time we did, and they ended up slaughtering tens of thousands of their own people, so not great. Put simply, a democracy is run purely by the will of the people. A republic, by contrast, is run by elected representatives designed to do the will of the people. Ergo, decision-making is determined by the people, but represented by a single person. Here the founders came to a problem. How many people should represent how many citizens? Should we do it by city, by state, by the amount of money someone had to contribute? In a newly formed nation, just after the fall of their first governing documents, the Articles of Confederation, this was a massive thing to get right. Should the founders have gone askew here, as we more than likely would have not gotten close to approaching our 250th birthday, as we will this July as a nation. The most right action available to the founders was the one that they took, a head count. Representation in one of two factions of Congress, the House of Representatives, would be determined by population. The higher faction, the Senate, would be evened out as two per state to account for even footing across the nation for larger issues. For smaller issues, one affecting the popular majority of Americans, the House of Representatives would represent the total population, as mentioned. So this begs another set of questions. How would those people actually be counted, and who exactly would be counted in the census to determine the number of the House of Representative members across our country? The answer to the first question was what we opened this episode with, which was the U.S. Census. The government office of the census simply went around America, polled Americans, and asked how many voting age males live in a particular household. When they got that number, they forwarded it on to the federal government every 10 years and adjusted accordingly based on the shifting demographics and population of a particular era around the country. However, as you can tell over the years, this has run into some obvious hiccups. What happens, for example, when millions of voting-age black males who previously had no rights at all suddenly appear in your country and started taking place in everyday society? These men technically were not citizens. What do we do with them? How about women who in the early 1900s began to protest for the right to participate in American democracy through voting? How about someone who, when the world began to globalize, came here on a student visa to go to medical school and ended up staying for more than a 10-year period to finish their residency? Should they be counted? Thankfully, the founders got ahead of when the census was first instituted. And contrary to the belief of what I just said, and to most people today, the United States Census actually doesn't count American citizens. Rather, it counts American persons, and that's a massive difference. Therefore, the total quote-unquote population of people in the United States as represented in the census is not the total quote-unquote population of its citizens, but rather the quote-unquote total population of the people who reside in the United States. For example, if you're from Zimbabwe and happen to be vacationing in Bozeman, Montana when the Census Bureau comes to town, congratulations. You could be counted as part of America's latest demographic trend. So when you think about it, the census is a very big deal because representation in Congress is a very big deal. For example, both the House of Representatives and the Senate lean Republican at the time of this writing by a total of about 3 votes apiece. And that's notwithstanding party affiliation and loyalties to various factions such as MAGA, traditional Republicans, leftists, Democrats, socialists, whatever. In other words, even though Republicans as of now have a quote-unquote majority, they are far removed from a dominant position. So given this, let's think back through those historical moments we just referenced. How big of a deal do you think it was for the balance of power of the most influential part of our government to be shaken up with the naturalization of millions of black slaves in the 1860s, which was later ratified by the 14th Amendment, or millions of women, regardless of color, which was later ratified by the 19th Amendment? Put simply, it changed the makeup of the country. I'm not making the case at all that black people or women should not be able to vote. I view both as anti-constitutional, as a matter of fact, which is why the Constitution itself had to be amended, in order to accommodate those demographics. We are better for it when all Americans have a say in what they want. Why? because all Americans, regardless of what we can't change about ourselves, are bound by a common culture and a common creed, even though we may and always will, by the way, have differences in how that creed and culture is enforced and practiced. But that does not change the fact that when both of these groups were grafted onto the American electorate, the nation completely and totally changed. A lot of that was for the better, of course. I happen to like, wait for it, both black people and women. What a concept. There is a reason why the United States has been the most progressive nation in the best way possible and by a wide margin for the advancement of civil rights. We have principles that transcend circumstances and time. Those matter, particularly for sewing together the fabric of a nation. But let's stop and think about it for a second. We are now more than a century removed from those millions of people being, at the snap of a finger, immediately integrated within the United States, shaping the tenor and tone of our nation for, at minimum, a decade. What if that were to happen again, right now? What would become of our nation should we immediately adopt what was once a completely divorced and foreign block of our society into our nation? Moreover, what if I told you that it wasn't a question? Because it's not. In fact, it's happening right now. We are undergoing a third massive societal shift in the form of the American voter base as we speak. It has been in motion for decades, slowly built at a methodical pace so as to not draw too much attention to its existence. But it does indeed exist, and if it is not corrected, it will completely consume the United States of America. The mass adoption of illegal immigrants. Since the census was last taken in 2020, it has been estimated that more than 20 million people have entered and now reside within the borders of the United States illegally. And since the census now only counts residents and not citizens, that is now 20 million more people in a nation of estimated 330 million that will determine representation in the legislation of the United States government, particularly in cities that dub themselves quote-unquote sanctuaries and border states such as Texas, where I live, Arizona, New Mexico. For context, there were only 4 million African American slaves, not including males who could only vote at the time, by the way, that became naturalized citizens after the Civil War ended. And 26 million women in all the United States were eligible to vote in the 1920 presidential election, which averaged about a 40% voting rate, depending on who you count. So roughly about the same. By all metrics, if just this most recent wave of illegal immigrants is counted within the census, it will be a 5x improvement and marketed difference from those two demographics being improved and moved into the American electorate, i.e., the most seismic demographic shift in the history of our country. And now, before someone calls me a jingoist or something, I should note, these figures are not strictly relegated to Mexican immigrants, although many of them are Mexican, and most of them have come through the Mexican border. When we threw open our borders, during the Biden presidency especially, we threw them open to all nations: Venezuela, Poland, Nicaragua, China, others. We have caught the entire world coming through our border during the disaster of the Biden presidency, even though the costs have lagged far behind, and we're just seeing some of them now. And it should be noted as well that this massive block of soon-to-be-counted illegal immigrants are completely different from black people of the 1860s and women of the 1910s. The biggest and most important difference: the people that came in through our southern border were all imported for political purposes, not for the purposes of American civil rights. They do not understand American culture. They do not want to understand American culture, or else they would have not broken our laws and cut the line to our actual immigration system, even though that one, to be fair, is a mess as well. We are a nation of laws, a nation of order. Anyone who violates them should be punished as appropriate, i.e., in this case, not being allowed in our country for any purposes. I would expect the same treatment for me if I were to pass through the borders of Russia or Uganda. I am not Russian or Ugandan because I simply reside within Russian or Ugandan borders. Russia and Uganda have rich culture, shared ethnic heritage, and uniform codes of conduct. I do not fit within their cultural systems because I am an American. To pretend that I am not in those situations would be to spit in the face of their culture, customs, norms, and practices. Simply put, we do not treat illegal immigrants that way in our country at all. In fact, we do the exact opposite of that. and it's hurting and potentially killing us. A good number of illegal immigrants are only able to get by using federal funding that is perpetuated by state governments as a slush fund. See Minneapolis, for example, including not only food stamps, but phones and even low interest rate loans and mortgages. Aren't those programs supposed to be for Americans, most notably for poor and minority Americans? They are. But do our leaders care? Evidently not at all. Remember the riots in Los Angeles after the Palisades fires, when those quote-unquote protesting ICE lit American flags on fire, burned down businesses, and waved Mexican flags on top of torched sedans while riding around in motorcycles? Or in Minnesota, where they stormed a church and riled up their demonically inspired protesters so much that 2 of them got killed for their stupidity, all in the name of quote-unquote helping minorities, or worse, in a false doctrinal Christian context, quote-unquote loving our neighbors. They are our neighbors, surely. They're image bearers of God. But to say that these people deserve elevation above the needs of struggling American citizens is the recipe for civilizational suicide. The reason why leftist Americans are being whipped up into a frenzy is because for the past 30 years, our leaders have allowed the country to be slowly taken over by illegal migrants. It has become a calling card of the American left, which is now morphed in the most drastic of cases into a literal battle cry. So why is this allowed to happen? Why, for the past 4 decades, has this been allowed to happen on both sides of the political aisle, by the way? Ronald Reagan's amnesty bill in California, coupled with his gross empowerment of corporate America, completely gutted our nation's most beautiful state, preparing it for the hell that it now currently resides in, and corporations to undercut American labor. Bill Clinton's trade deals outsourced jobs and opened the borders for cheap domestic labor. George Bush and Barack Obama blew up the Middle East, gutted the middle class, propped up the banks, and ushered in social justice. This is a bipartisan, intentional, managed decline and failure, one that has led America to complete and utter ruin. Well, a good answer to that question might be found in another demographic trend, one that is even more subtle, but one that could be proved just as significant. Due to the fallout of things like COVID, the 2020 election, inflation, and a wide variety of other factors, an internal migration in the United States has been well underway, and the results are staggering. So here's the neat and skinny. There have been a massive exodus from blue states to red states. The numbers are not small at all. They're in the millions, with California, for example, falling further into decay, states like Illinois becoming more expensive and crime-ridden, and New York being run by a communist. Those numbers will accelerate. Millions have already left, and millions more will follow. Where are they going? Red states. The updated House of Representatives map for the 2030 census shows a massive swing in favor of legislative control in Republican-dominant states, even with that mass influx of illegal immigration into blue states. If things continue on this trend, it will be a bloodbath for Democrats when it comes to their already dwindling popular support among the existing American electorate. But thankfully for the American left, they have a counterpunch to this, as mentioned, illegal immigration. Many people took heat that in the ramp up to the 2024 election, they called it the quote-unquote last election. People said this was overheated rhetoric, even though no punishment was doled out to the people who had encouraged Donald Trump getting shot and shot at twice. Those people were crazy, right-wing conspiracy theorists, they said. Well, one of those so-called crazy right-wing conspiracy theorists was Elon Musk. On the eve of the 2024 election, he went on Joe Rogan's show to explain just why he had gotten so deeply embedded within Donald Trump's camp. Was part of it to help with his businesses? No doubt at all. Get close to power? Absolutely. Motivated by his regret of his second-born son getting brainwashed and butchered by the radical gender cult in America? You better believe it. But also at an equally deep level, Musk has a very deep sense of patriotism. He is a legal immigrant, someone who came through the system the right way and used his gifts to better his adopted country. He is the example, at least in this case, of someone who did things the right way. In his episode with Rogan, he outlined a very simple scenario. If illegal immigration continued at this pace it would have, an estimated 20 million in a little under 4 years, those people would pledge their loyalty to those who allowed them to come in. The American left, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, whomever. And why wouldn't they? In addition, voter ID was being, at the time, co-opted by the American left into an issue of civil rights. It was, quote-unquote, racist to demand that someone show an ID at a voting booth. Might as well mail it in. If you don't have to show your face, why bother? In some extreme cases, illegal immigrants were allowed to apply for driver's licenses, get a mortgage on a home, and own property, rights only given to those of American citizens as noted in the Bill of Rights. Musk continued, if our new class of immigrant serfs, when the Democrats themselves had admitted they only wanted to babysit their children, clean their homes, and pick their strawberries, not kidding, look it up, were allowed into the country, there would be a blue majority everywhere in America. Every state would be California, Illinois, and New York. Conservatives would never hold a majority again. The political monopoly of a new age demonic leftism would be permanently enshrined. This wasn't hyperbole. This was just math. It has been said over the past few months, particularly as Minnesota has descended into hell, that the issue raging in our country is a debate about immigration. This is incorrect. The issue raging in our country is a debate about elections. The American left in its current form is on the losing side of every single issue: gender, marriage, family, economics, foreign policy, war, whatever. They have no cards to play. They are the most unpopular political party by the data since the Whig Party blew up in the 1850s. They have no future, no hope in their current form. So instead of adjusting and reforming, which is what most sane political parties do, the current version of the American left has decided to say, screw it, and import a whole new generation of voters to replace their old ones. Even though they are in cultural retreat to a certain degree right now, the American left still holds tremendous political clout in our institutions. Due to the laziness of American conservatives, there are many strings that the left could still pull. The biggest ones? The census, and the elections that result downstream from the census due to the empowerment of illegal immigration reform. This is why the propaganda and AstroTurf campaign against ICE is reaching a fever pitch. This is why they say that, quote-unquote, voter ID is racist. This is why they say stupid phrases like, quote-unquote, no human is illegal. This is why they are so militant about stopping Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda in the courts, in the halls of Congress, and on the streets of Minneapolis. The American left knows that if they lose illegal immigration, they lose everything holding them in power. For the American left, who are and have always been obsessed with power, this absolutely cannot stand. But if they get their way, Elon Musk will be proven correct. There won't be another free election in America. The American left isn't at war with Donald Trump or ICE or Tom Homan. They're at war with the concept of American citizenship. They're at war with the concept of sovereignty. They're at war with the notion that Americans, and only Americans, have a right to their own self-governance. It is both a privilege and a right to be an American citizen. A war on citizenship is a war on America itself and all of its people. This is not an issue of left or right, although both are trying to make it so. This is an issue of existential existence, of what it truly means to be an American. Not everyone can be one. The idea that has been spun that says you can is a lie. It will take guts to stand up to the bullies perpetuating this nonsense, but we must have this hard discussion. If America and its citizens are to be preserved, we cannot let this mass illegal immigration stand. All who have come into our country must be deported. Our border must be closed. The crackdowns must continue, no matter the short-term costs. If you believe America is worth preserving, this is the stance you must take. If you don't, your citizenship means nothing to you. And that's a shame, particularly given how many people want it more than you do. Okay, so how does this all break down specifically? What does this mean? And I think for a deeper dive in this, or I know for a deeper dive in this rather, a book that I would recommend, one of the best books I've read probably in the past 5 years, is a book by who I believe one of the great living Americans today, a book by a gentleman by the name of Victor Davis Hanson, who is one of my favorite people, and he's remarkably smart and genuinely a good man, a good person. He wrote a phenomenal book a couple of years ago called The Dying Citizen. And VDH has written a lot about a lot of things. He's written about the rise of Donald Trump, about the rise of populism, about, a bunch of different things. He's written about war. He's a historian, a classicist, bunch of different things. He's a wonderful guy. But one thing that's always been a theme of his that I found particularly interesting is he's written a lot about decline of nations, decline of empire, decline of the United States. He used this to describe, I've never heard someone articulate this about Donald Trump. The reason why Donald Trump rose was that he called out decline. Our infrastructure's falling apart. Our people are becoming poorer. Our borders open, whatever. And so the dying citizen was really interesting because I had never really thought before about the concept of American citizenship, because I am an American citizen. I was born here. I'm going to die here. I'm going to live the rest of my life here. I really don't have that much interest in seeing the world or traveling or whatever. Like, I like America. I like where I live. I like my country. And I never really thought deeper about it than I'm just here. I was born here, and I never really had anything articulated about it in a way that was specific towards the concept of American citizenship. And so that book, and really that entire process, opened my eyes to really what is citizenship? What is important about America? Why should we preserve this? And the conversation around all of these other cultural issues, around social justice, around Black Lives Matter, around immigration, around foreign policy, on economics, it is all about, this is VDH's point, and I believe this is right, all of these issues are basically the conversation underneath all of the issues that we talk about all the time, the surface level issues, the ones that get clipped in news headlines and social media reels and everything like that, is the erosion and the ostracization of the American citizen and American citizenship. And VDH's point, which I think is right, is that American citizens are being both replaced and deprioritized. First of all, we water down what it means to be a citizen, and then we just get rid of the meaning in general. We replace them. We move them out of the way. We don't care about them. We kind of just move. They're an inconvenience for us. They're kind of a pestilence to us in that way. And so this gets into what is happening right now, actually, in terms of this act being passed right now and debated through Congress, I believe it just passed the House at the time of this recording, and it's going into the Senate right now, I believe, which is called the SAVE Act. And so the SAVE Act is an act that is getting passed through Congress right now that is mandating voter ID in elections, at least at the federal level. I'm not sure about the states. And so at the federal level, it will mandate that when you go to an election booth, when you go to a county clerk's office, when you go to whatever, if you're voting for president, if you're voting for vice president, if you're voting for a federal, whatever, a federal office, whatever that might be, you have to pull up a passport, a driver's license, a student ID, something. And you have to say that, hey, I live here. This is my address. This is where I live. This is a photo of me. This is a mandate of my records, my social security number, whatever. And so this is one of the most highly contested pieces of legislation I've ever seen. I really don't pay much attention to really what goes on in Congress. They all annoy me anyway. I like about 2 senators, really, at the end of the day. And so I like maybe 3, but really 2. I think that most of them annoy me. And so I really don't pay attention, to be honest, all that much, even though I probably should. But this is getting a lot of press and a lot of coverage on both sides of the political aisle. And the conservatives and the Republicans are wanting to pass this, and the Democrats and the leftists are saying we don't want to pass this at all. They believe it's restrictionary. They believe that it's unethical, that it's anti-civil rights, everything like that. But really, what this act says is, if you want to vote, you got to show an ID. You can't just pull up randomly and just vote. This would be like if I were go to Uganda and I were just to say, hey, I want to vote for the president or prime minister, whoever it is in Uganda. And they're like, okay, yep, go ahead. I have no ties to Uganda. I have no ties to that government, no ties to that presidency, no ties to that country. It's not my country. And I have nothing against Uganda, but it's just not my country. And so this is what we're talking about with the SAVE Act. And this is why this illegal immigration conversation is such a big deal to the American left, because if this SAVE Act passes, and I truly hope it does, because that rids a lot of the issues that we just talked about in my monologue, then it just gets rid of them entirely, which would be great. And this deals a massive blow to the purposes of illegal immigration, because illegal immigration, for leftists especially, causes a lot of headache. Social services are strained, crime goes up, a bunch of societal unrest inside of Chicago, New York, particularly, by the way, as I mentioned, in minority areas and black communities, Hispanic-heavy communities, everything like poor communities, everything like that. There is a massive headache, even in leftist-dominant parts of America, with illegal immigration. But the reason they put up with it is not because they care about illegal immigrants, not because they're accepting and loving and tolerant, quote unquote. It is because they want to win elections. Period. Point blank, full stop. That's what this is about. That's why the SAVE Act is a big deal. And so this would be a massive win for American sovereignty, for self-governance, if this SAVE Act passes, because it would deal a massive blow to the purposes of illegal immigration and the stability of our elections. And so that is the finishing move on this. This is like the people's elbow at the end of this whole conversation. But what I want to do is go back in time and see, how in the heck did this happen in the first place? How are we even getting to this point? And so what the American left has done, like a lot of issues, is they've slowly marched their way through this issue and made it a massive thing where they can have control over our institutions. And the first step to this was that they made immigration a civil rights issue, which is really interesting, because when you look back at immigration throughout the history of our country, through the history of all countries really, immigration was never a civil rights issue up until very, very recently. Because immigration, really, when you look at it at its bones, it's still not. It was an issue of, first and foremost, primarily two things: economics and foreign policy. So immigration, and the reason why immigration mattered, and immigration enforcement mattered, and immigration, policy getting through everything else, the reason why it mattered was because we wanted to protect our borders, protect our nations. If we get invaded by a foreign army, we want to have strong borders. And if we have massive movements of people that are going to start squatting on people's lawns or living in parks or taking up dollars that the government wants to spend on different things, we should take issue with that. And we should say, hey, not everyone gets access to our nation. The same thing as you wouldn't want random people just pulling up in your family room and eating out of your fridge and everything else. It's like you want a border outside of your house. That's why we have doors and locks and fences and security systems and everything like that. It's the same with a nation. If you don't have a border, if you don't have protections around your nation, you don't have a nation. The same thing is true with a home. If you don't have protections around your home, you don't have a home. If everyone can live there, it's not yours, by definition. And the second thing was that we wanted to protect American workers. We wanted to protect American businesses, particularly American labor and their wages. I remember I got in a debate once about, this is probably, about 7 years ago now. I remember when, immigration was getting brought up, and, my friend at the time, he was decently, politically moderate, and then he dated this crazy leftist chick who called me a bunch of names and everything like that. And I don't know where they're at right now, but anyway. And so he was a good friend of mine for a long time. And I brought up this point about, hey, illegal immigration, it dilutes American wages. And he's like, well, how is that possible? And I'm like, dude, because wages are set by what the population demands. The population demands a lower wage because they just want access to the American labor market. Companies that are dominated by bigger organizations, they can throw their weight around, corporations, multinational companies, all these things, will certainly acquiesce to that request. And so we wanted to protect, and we should want to protect, American wages, because we want Americans to have better lives so they can pay for their kids' college and take their wife on a nice dinner date once a month, or go on a vacation, or invest in their retirement, whatever the case might want to be. Wages are what stimulates the economy. If we have a strong middle class, if everyone believes they have opportunity economically, they'll be more than likely to participate in the welfare of a society. That's how America was able to get so wealthy in the 20th century, and why we've gotten so poor since this issue really, really became a massive part of the conversation culturally. A lot of it is due to this discussion of immigration, particularly illegal immigration. But recently, you have probably the last 10 years, but especially the last, I would say 20 or 30 years probably, but especially in the last decade, leftists began to frame immigration as an issue not of foreign policy, not of economics, but as an issue of civil rights, which changed the issue and framing of the issue in people's minds from a very practical ones and zeros discussion for a very emotional discussion. It shifted the tone of the conversation and made it really a trigger point for a lot of people. And so then what happened, and what has really ramped up recently, especially under Barack Obama's tenure and especially in the tenure of now Donald Trump and Joe Biden, is we have made now all issues of civil rights issues of culture. And this is defined by the movement of social justice. So as soon as social justice and wokeism began to rise, and wokeism was elevated to become a massive part of corporate hiring and discrimination in college admissions and the way that we talked about things culturally. And we'll get to the whole conversation about white people in a second, because that's a really hot button issue that we need to discuss too. And so this began to rise up in really the late 2000s and particularly the early and mid 2010s. And when Donald Trump entered the political conversation in 2015, when he started to run for president, he was really the first person to make immigration an American sovereignty issue. He was the first person because he worked on construction sites and he saw this erosion of the working class. And that was really the first big thing I remember about Donald Trump, was the whole build a wall thing. And so he made it an issue of, hey, these people are coming through our border and this is not good and we should put a stop to that and deport people. And Barack Obama had deported millions of people already, but when it turned into an issue of American sovereignty, that was when the issue flipped. And so this is when all civil rights issues, quote unquote, even though they're not civil rights issues, were flipped to social issues. And when you have a social issue, when you believe people are becoming oppressed, when people are getting discriminated against, this is kind of like the hippie boomer era of the 1960s, where we were going to fight on the behalf of gay people and women in the workplace and black people and things like that. And now you have this new aged wild thing where really all the major civil rights issues were taken care of. Douglas Murray has called this before the St. George and retirement syndrome, where St. George slayed the dragon, but he's still out in the field swinging the sword and fighting imaginary dragons. That's really what this modern wokeism and social justice is. So now the feelings of everyone and all people were elevated to the highest levels of importance, which matters because in the context of immigration and other things, the real matters like economics and foreign policy were downgraded. So it didn't really matter what our policies on war, on the national debt, on monetary policy, on the things that really affected people on a day-to-day basis. Those were all shunted to the side, and all issues of social issues and social justice were elevated in the conversation. So the American left co-opted immigration and made it a very practical, or took it from a very practical discussion, rather, to a very emotional discussion. And now people were very heated. They were wanting to use illegal immigration as a way to spread love and show empathy to people and be compassionate, quote unquote. And then the third thing that really sent this into overdrive was that when Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, quote unquote, the 2020 election, Joe Biden opened the border. And this was the real death blow. And this is where things went just crazy off the reservation. When Joe Biden came into office, when Alejandro Mayorkas, who in my opinion is one of the biggest criminals in the history of the United States, opened the border, destroyed the border policies under Donald Trump, and allowed, again, estimates of 20 million people into the country, and about 1 million of whom were in some ways criminals at the time. Not all of them are criminals. Well, all of them are criminals because they crossed the border, but not all of them are additional criminals as related to they stole, they killed people, they, whatever. This completely demoralized and destroyed our nation's sovereignty. And Joe Biden and his administration, they flew these people around the country. They put them in sanctuary cities. They allowed them to flood places like Springfield, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, and a bunch of other things, and are now activating them to feed their voter base. And so this is an issue of national sovereignty. This is an issue of an invasion of our nation by foreigners. And it's hurting Americans. And this is the future, as Elon Musk said, that awaits us if we don't do anything about this. So the actions that the Trump administration is taking right now, and I remember I told my friend who's on the left and pretty far on the left, we can still have civil discussions. And he asked me, after Trump got elected, hey, is he actually going to do all the things that he says he's going to do? And I said, he's going to do two things. He's going to do one thing in particular. I forget what the second thing was, but he's going to do one thing. he is going to deport people. And it's going to be ugly. And there's going to be social media wars. And there's going to be protests in the street. And people are going to die. And there's going to be people that are getting ripped apart from their families and stuff. But I said he needs to do it and he's going to do it. Because this is an issue of national security, national sovereignty, national ability to maintain status as a nation. And if we don't do it, we're not a country. We're just not. And it's hurting people. And it's hurting our culture. It's hurting our cultural cohesion. It's hurting our way that we go about affecting people on a day-to-day basis. And it needs to stop. And it doesn't matter how people feel about it. It's a matter of national sovereignty, national security. And we need to make sure that no matter what happens, that is being emphasized and enforced. Okay, and if this discussion wasn't thorny enough, let's throw another element into here. So, who is being hurt by illegal immigration? Who's really being hurt by it? And the answer is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it's true. And the biggest demographic that is being hurt by illegal immigration are American-born, native-born American whites. It's just the truth. And I remember when this discussion was getting kicked up a couple years ago, when everyone was getting called, "Oh, you're a jingoist, you're a white nationalist, you're a supremacist, you're a whatever the names they wanted to call them. You're great replacement theory." We'll get to that in a second. And then there was literally a headline in the New York Times. I forget who wrote it. I believe I don't remember, Goldberg or Goldman or something. I don't know. It's Gold something. And she said you can look this up. There was an article in the New York Times literally titled, "We Can Replace Them." Replace who? Who is the them? Native American-born whites. American-born people generally, but American-born whites, because they're not importing a lot of white people, although white people have crossed the border. So the goal of, by the way, leftist and mainstream chair of commerce style Republicans, the crony capitalist types who are wanting to use foreign-born labor for cheap labor inside of America, and those who are wanting to disenfranchise American citizens by importing a serf class of people to do their bidding at the threat of deportation. We can replace them. Who is the them? American votes, American labor, by leftists and mainstream old-school Republicans, the Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney types. The goal is to replace you. The goal is not to get more Indian food and have more tacos and have this wonderful kumbaya multiculturalism in society. The goal is to replace Americans. Like they're saying it out loud. Julian Castro ran for president in 2020. Ran on this platform as well. And so we're not having an honest conversation about who is the loser in all this. And the clear loser, I'm not just saying it because I am one, and I'm not trying to victimize American white people, because this is where it gets toxic. This is where the Nick Fuentes types, the Groyper types, this is where they all come into this discussion and they ruin it for everybody. But there is a point to all of this. And the clear loser, the point of all this, the clear loser demographically in all of the debates about immigration are native-born Americans, and particularly native-born whites. And this is where, I'm going to be very careful here. This is where Nick Fuentes has a point. This is where people like Nick Fuentes are right, even though their solutions are wrong. Black people are inferior, blame the Jews, whatever. That's not right. But is Nick Fuentes right that young American white people are being disenfranchised and white people are getting affected by this in a larger way than other demographics? Absolutely. When you look at all of this from all these different angles of these negative consequences, who are the people that have lost their jobs due to illegal immigration and the outsourcing of American labor? Middle class and working middle class and poor white men. Who is getting flooded with fentanyl the most? White communities. Who are getting killed by these people that are coming in and, in some cases, hurting, mugging, killing people? American whites. Look at the data. Look at all the stories you see on the news. Look at all the stories you see on social media. And I'm sure there are a lot of Mexicans, a lot of black people, a lot of Asian people whoever, name your person, that have gotten affected by this. But the loser to all of this is American-born white people. It's in the data. And this is where the conversation around the quote-unquote great replacement theory, this is where all this comes in. So let's address the elephant in the room. So Tucker Carlson's been calling this out for a long time in a way that is not racist at all, by the way. He's not doing what Fuentes is doing. He chastised Nick Fuentes for this on his show. But Tucker's been getting slammed about this for years. People have gotten slammed about this for years. All of the populist, nationalist, MAGA types, including me. But it is true when you look at the data. Americans, and particularly American white people, are getting replaced and crowded out of every area of society in America right now. It's just true. When you look at, and this is not only true when it comes to immigration, by the way, there is a war on American white people culturally. And it's happening in Europe as well. Europe is a whole different mess, and they're way further along, thankfully, than we are. And I think we're reversing course. So when you look at DEI policy, DEI is anti-white racism. Equity is racism. College admissions, now barriers to certain jobs, employment, benefits. And by the way, all the message in the cultural stuff. White people are the problem. Whiteness is a disease. AOC just said this, I think, the other day. Whiteness is a social construct. I'm white. What is whiteness? I don't know. Like, please tell me. Somebody tell me. I still haven't heard a coherent message of what equity is. And so this, and again, white men are the problem. Masculinity is toxic. Straight white men. Jennifer Welch the other day said white evangelical Christianity is like the devil or something. I don't know. And so we're seeing the negative consequences of this right now, because this created the Nick Fuentes types, the Groyper types. This is a result of this type of messaging and this type of policy. This policy around immigration, around DEI, around economics, around name your thing. We're having this conversation around home ownership right now. Why are native-born Americans and native-born white people discriminated against when we have DEI loans and loans that are a lower interest rate for illegal immigrants to buy a home? Why is that? Why are young white men discriminated against in the workforce and in college admissions? Like, they didn't do anything wrong, other than, I guess, being born in the wrong skin color, which is a sin in any race. It was a sin when we did it to black people. It's a sin if we do it to Mexican or Asian people or whoever. It's a sin when we do it against white people. I don't care that white people are the majority in the country right now. It's a sin. It's wrong. It's anti-Christian, by the way, which is why Nick Fuentes is wrong to do it to Jewish people, to do it to black people, to do it to Mexican people, to do it to women, to do it whatever. It's wrong to judge someone on immutable characteristics. And so this assault on native-born white men in particular has emboldened and underclassed the Fuentes Groyper types of angry, resentful, mostly young white men who are wanting to hurt the people who did this to them. And they're wrong to want to hurt people. Hurting people is not good. But you can't look at all of the stuff that they've been fed. What have these young white men been fed for their entire lives, including me, by the way? I'm 28, so I'm not that young anymore, but I know a lot of young white men. A lot of them are around me, and I know a lot of them who are in this cult, who have been taken in by this ideology. They have been told that you're worthless, that you suck, that you don't have anything of value to give, that you're inherently sinful because of your race, that you're inherently sinful because of your genitalia, that your parents are bad, that your nation's bad, that your country's bad, that you're bad, that you need to repent for your sins, that you need to emasculate yourself, that you need to apologize for being white or for being a man or for being whatever stupid thing that they want to say. And, we took it on the chin for a while. But now a lot of young white guys are angry. And they're like, nope, I'm not going to take this anymore. But that anger is not being channeled righteously. It's being co-opted by Nick Fuentes, by the Red Pill guys, by Andrew Tate, by all of these guys as an angry, chauvinistic, nihilistic, whatever direction you want to direct it in, vision and message that is being perpetuated across our culture. And it's destroying people. I know men right now, and they're good men, but they're apologizing and they're getting sucked into a lot of really, really concerning and dangerous stuff. Neo-Nazism, apologizing on, sympathizing with Adolf Hitler. And these are good men that are being enslaved by bad ideas. And when you back an animal into a corner, when you back someone into a corner and you hit them and you hit them and you hit them and you hit them, don't be surprised when they try to hit you below the belt or they try to hit you where it hurts. And it all stems from a feeling that they're being under attack. And they're not wrong to think that. And their responses are wrong, and we should not justify them. I'm not justifying them. But to say that they have no reason to feel the way that they feel is not accurate. And we need to have an honest conversation about it, because if we're not having an honest conversation about it, it will continue. And I don't want it to continue because it's toxic and it's wrong and it's unfair to other people, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your gender, to get punished for that. And I just want it to stop. And I have a feeling a lot of people want it to stop. And so an honest conversation around this is needed, I think. So we talked about young men. Let's talk about young women for a second. So Mike Lee, who's a senator from Utah, he posted a chart on the birth rate recently. And now he said, I think this is latest data that's came from somewhere. I forget what the source is, so look it up and correct me if I'm wrong. But Mike Lee, he posted this chart on his X feed, and he said, and it showed that every single state in the United States of America is now under replacement birth rate, 2.1 births per family. Cataclysmic, awful. And so there's a lot to the birth rate conversation, and we as a society and as a culture need to do everything we can to reverse it. We need to have more kids and have more marriages and live in places where marriage and family are encouraged. And there are a lot of people that are doing a lot of things to help this. That's being talked about a lot more. Kevin Roberts is and the Heritage Foundation, the most powerful conservative think tank in the world, is doing a lot for this. Elon Musk is, even though he's doing a lot of things wrong, is having lots of kids and saying, hey, get married and have kids, or have a lot of kids, maybe not get married. You shouldn't listen to Elon Musk, especially if you're a Christian, on this. But anyways, there's a lot to this conversation. I want to do a whole episode on this at some point. I'm just not going to do it today. But we're going to get into a specific conversation around why the birth rate is tanking, because I think this is an important conversation to have. And the bottom line of all of it is we need to do everything we can to reverse it. And so this is another reason, by the way, why immigration and why illegal immigration is being pushed so much, especially in Europe. A lot of people in Europe have pushed immigration to this place because they foolishly, by the way, believe that in order to keep society stable, we need to import more quote-unquote citizens. Just import people and replace the population because, the native-born population is not reproducing and we just need to import more people from the third world. That's completely insane. That's completely ridiculous. That's why Europe is a mess, and we shouldn't do that. The Europeans were stupid to ever think that would be something that would work. But there's a deeper layer to this in America as well, because young people, particularly young women, particularly young leftist women, left-leaning women, have been not encouraged to have kids. This is true in my own family, by the way. The amount of times I love my family, and I'm not talking about my immediate family. My immediate family, my dad has told me for my entire life that, having kids is awesome, and I can't wait till you have kids, and I can't wait for you to be a dad. My mom has told me very similar, but a lot of messaging in my family was get your career straight, then have kids, then go to college, focus on your schoolwork. All of them had kids. I have a lot of cousins, but that was de-emphasized. I'm sure my aunts and uncles had and my grandparents had the best intentions at heart, but that was just not something that was emphasized in that way. And this isn't true with my family, because hardly any of my family, I believe, is a real crazy leftist, which is, thank God for that. That's a good thing. But culturally, what I see, it is particularly true when it comes to leftist women. And there is now a very famous poll that's come out, I believe from Gallup, that said that they ranked the top 13 priorities for young men and for young women. They polled young men and young women. They asked, if you had to rank 1 through 13 your top priorities, what would you prioritize in your life? And women ranked marriage and family 13 out of 13. While for young men, it was number 1. Getting married, starting a family was number 1 for men, number, I believe, 12 or 13 for women. So why is that? That's a pretty stark difference. That's insane. That's civilizational suicide. Why is that? And so my belief and my opinion is that young, primarily white women that are left-leaning, because women are going way left, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, women have been encouraged by their family, by the culture, by social media algorithms to fulfill their nurturing and mothering instincts and roles with other things. And the latest thing is illegal immigration. When you look at all these crazy ICE protests, when you look at all of the wildest people, when you look at the No Kings protest and the people who mocked Charlie Kirk's assassination, why were all of them women? Why are all of them, well, with the exception of the guy that got shot in Minneapolis, which is a tragedy, and heart goes out to him, even though don't agree with him attacking a federal law enforcement officer, but, no American deserves to be shot by federal law enforcement if they're, whatever. That's a tragedy when anyone dies. I'm pro-life. But regardless, it's a different conversation for a different day. But so you see a lot of these women getting really riled up by a lot of this stuff, cheering the Charlie Kirk assassination, mocking federal law enforcement, being violent with federal officers, all these things. And so what I think this shows at a very deep, a spiritual level, I think, is that no matter how much cultural brainwashing goes on within our culture, we cannot make women's instincts go away. We just can't. Women will always, and men will always regress to the mean. Men are men, women are women. Men think like men, women think like women. We can't train it out of people. You are who you are at a very base level. And what I see is that many leftist women see social causes, Black Lives Matter, No Kings, particularly in the case of ICE and immigration, as a way to express motherhood, especially if they are single and childless, which is why they are the first to the fight in all of these causes. Charlie Kirk was mean to trans people and to illegal immigrants and to women. So I'm going to be a mothering, nurturing presence and cheer on when he gets shot in the neck on social media. These poor illegal immigrants who are helpless and they just want a better life for themselves and their families, and these mean ICE officers who are just enforcing the law and deporting people and everything like that. I'm going to throw things at them. I'm going to insult them. I'm going to yell in their face. I'm going to try to hit them with my car. I'm going to do all these things. When mothers, and this is, by the way, this is not just a human thing. This is an everything thing. Mammals, animals across all species, they will do everything they can to protect their perceived young, because they are vulnerable, because they can't protect themselves. And so what leftist women are doing now is they're grafting themselves on and they're expressing that motherhood instinct through all of these social causes. Black Lives Matter, No Kings, immigration, whatever. And the American left is recognizing this, because by the data, the only group, Democrats, communists, American leftists have left reliably as a voter bloc in America. They've lost a lot of black people, young black men especially. They've lost, Latino people. They've lost a lot of women. They've certainly lost a lot of young men across all races. The only reliable, they've lost Jews. They've lost everybody that they could reliably depend on. That coalition that Barack Obama built of like the anti-straight Christian white people demographic. The only demographic they have left are single, young, mentally unstable, childless women who believe in the craziest of lies. I mean, these women, I feel so bad for them, genuinely, like I do. And for some women, could this be fine? I mean, I guess. I don't think so, but I mean, maybe. I'm never going to say never. But think of the amount of brainwashing that has had to happen to get young women to believe the things they believe, that the American left tells them. A career is going to make you more fulfilled than a family. Men can become women. Illegal immigrants are your children. You don't need to have your own biological children. Having a family is oppressive. Like this is nuts. This is totally, completely bonkers that we are going along with this. And we need to discourage this. I've talked about this a lot, and I'm going to keep talking about it until the cows come home. We need to discourage this in young women. And unfortunately, due to that cultural clout that a lot of the American left has, it's probably going to be too late for a lot of them. And I think it is. I know a lot of women who are going to be enslaved to this philosophy forever, and they're going to regret it far too late. And, God bless them, and I hope that they figure it out, and I hope that they are able to find some sort of peace. But we can't stop trying when it comes to this group of people. And we need to put forth a message that says, hey, you don't have to believe this. You can actually be happy. You can actually have things that are going to fulfill you and make you a better person, and do whatever you need to do to make sure that you are living a good life. Women deserve that as much as men do. Young men are getting fed that, but young women aren't. And we need to express that to them. We need to make that known to them because it's not getting pressed anywhere else. So we need to lead. We need to take charge on that. Okay, so let's land the plane here. This whole context, this whole comment about, or this whole discussion rather, about illegal immigration and all the things that have fallen out from it is all about American citizenship. So, I think we've lost as a culture what it means and the importance of understanding what it means to be an American citizen. And if we do not remember the importance of our citizenship, the importance of why our country exists, the importance of what we owe to our country, what our country has promised to us, then we have no hope. We are doomed to be condemned to the whims of our leaders who want to, as I mentioned, remove us from that position in our society. There are very, very few people in our government, in our business structure that really value Americans. And we need to raise up a generation of leaders that value Americans first. And this isn't a political point. This is a civilizational point. This is an American point. And so a lot of our leaders, the dominant voices in many ways of our society, want to remove the concept of citizenship from the American citizen. And we just can't, like if that happens, we're cooked, we're done. We cannot allow that to happen because it will completely upend and destroy our civilization if we allow it to. And the illegal immigration discussion is proof of that, I think. And we need to remember why citizenship matters. And really, I think it's three things that I think we need to remember about really what makes an American and why citizenship matters and how we can prioritize American citizenship. And really the first thing is that Americans and only Americans should be prioritized because America, wait for it, is for Americans. Period. Russia is for, wait for it, Russians. China is for, wait, Chinese. Spain is for the Spanish. If you're a nation, you cannot be for another nation before your own nation. Like that's first principles. I think that's very basic. And we can and we should have relations with other nations and peoples and do our best to help serve them when we can, but not at the expense of Americans and what Americans are needing the most help with. And Ali Beth Stuckey's talked about this a lot, but this is not compassionate. This is not empathetic to put another nation or another group of people above your own people. If you're a parent, you can't put other children above your own children, even though children all deserve love and care. Take care of your house first. Put out your own fires in your own life. This is Jordan Peterson's rule that I say all the time. Put your own house in order before you criticize the world. The same is true with helping the world. Put your own house in order before you help the world. It's not compassionate. It's not empathetic because you're neglecting what is most important. So number 2, citizenship is both a birthright and it's earned. So we got to be very careful when walking this. There's a lot of harmful messaging going around right online and other places right now on this as well. If you are born in America, you are automatically an American by birth. That's true. That's natural law as defined by the Constitution. However, what we need to revive is a sense of civic duty. You must be brought up and taught to love your country, even though we haven't had great moments some of the time. And newsflash, all countries have had not great moments some of the time. America's not a perfect place, but America's the best place. That's objectively true. America does its best when citizens believe they have to earn their way to participate in it, as does everything. You can't, entitlement doesn't work. And we have a lot of entitled citizens that take citizenship for granted, which is how all of this has happened. We need to prioritize our citizenship. We need to be civically engaged. We need to understand what makes America America. And this is a delicate balance because you don't have to earn your citizenship, but you have to value it. You have to, because if you don't, then, what's the point? What's the point of being an American, of calling yourself an American if you don't value your own citizenship? There's really no point, I would argue. And so lastly, I think this is a very important point. This is not emphasized at all, but it needs to be. You have to love America to lead in America. And this is, I think, one of the best things, maybe the best thing that Tucker Carlson's ever said, is that you cannot lead a country that you hate. You can't lead a family you hate. You can't lead a business you hate. You can't lead anything that you hate. And the truth is, there's a lot of people, particularly American leftists, that hate America that are currently leading America. And that's a bold statement. And I know it's going to get me in trouble probably, but how can you tell? If you love someone, do you want to change everything about them? If you love someone, do you want to rip everything out and install everything you want inside that person? No. Why? Because you value the person as they are. That's called unconditional love. Now, should you want them to improve? Yes. Should you want them to quit bad habits? Yes. Should you want them to emphasize good habits? Yes. That's fine. But you should not want to change fundamentally everything about them. If you do, I would argue you don't love that person. This is why men who are controlling emotionally abuse their female partners, their girlfriends, their wives, their spouses. Oh, I want you to be like this and do this and blah. That chauvinistic attitude about you need to do everything that I say. Why? You probably don't love them if that's what you think. I would argue that. I love my girlfriend. I don't want to change everything about her. I love my mom. I don't want to change everything about my mom. I love my brother and my sister, my dad, my friends. I don't want to change everything about them. I like who they are. I love who they are. I love them for who they are. Now, in some cases, this is no one in particular, by the way, so anyone listening to this, don't think this is you, because it's not. But in some cases, do I want them to be better? In some cases, of course. And you should want that. And they should want that for you, by the way, because that's what love is. You're not perfect just the way you are. No one is perfect just the way they are. But love is unconditional. Love is not keeping score. Love is not transactional. And the reason why the left, the American left, hates America is they want to change everything about America. The Constitution, the founding date of the country, who's in the country, everything, the education system, how we should enforce the laws, who gets to vote, everything. Including, and most harmfully, the citizens that make up America, which is, I think, egregiously offensive. You don't want to change everything about something that you love. And the people that do, and the people that practice this, need to go. They need to be purged from leadership if they preach that type of hating message. Because America is not a place for hatred. True hatred is changing everything about something without having an explanation for it, without reason for it. And that's what's been going on for too long, and it needs to stop. And we need to value our citizenship enough to say, stop it. No more. I'm not going to take it anymore. And if we do that, we'll fix a lot of things outside of immigration and immigration itself. Immigration is just a foot on the stool of this whole conversation about citizenship and why we should value it. Thank you all for watching. Own the day. Open your mind. See you next week.